thank goodness that we left some money in HSF that can now be utilized. We had put money in during our term in office. We never had any drawdowns in spite of the drop in oil prices in 2014-15 period and so on. So we await eagerly the legislation. I would want government to consider in doing that piece of legislation that they must specify what the money is exactly going to be used for. Is it related to COVID or is it related to repairing hotels in Tobago? I have no problem repairing hotels in Tobago. How is that a COVID-related? I've already heard the Prime Minister talking about that. I don't know how that is a COVID-related issue. I can think of far more important things to be done. You heard the foreign doctors talk about test. And that is one of the issues we raised today when we met with the Honourable Prime Minister. He was accompanied by two of our colleagues, Minister Camille Robbins-Regis and Minister Stuart Young. I was accompanied by Dr. Tim Gopi Singh and Dr. Rakram Bodo at that meeting with the Prime Minister. At the meeting, we indicated to the Prime Minister we were very happy to be discussing in a bipartisan manner, put aside the politics and so on, and that we did have the nation at heart, the best interests of the country at heart. And therefore, what we wanted to do was to share with him some suggestions, some recommendations as to how we can continue the fight against COVID-19. I pointed out that we had already taken certain actions. One, we had curtailed the holding of public meetings, party activities where the public would be involved, so no political meetings, no large gatherings. We have curtailed that to be rescheduled whenever it becomes possible again. We shared with our offices, parliamentary offices, and those of the councillors, we shared a protocol and a template for the conduct of business to ensure the highest levels of safety and security. We shared that with staff in our various offices. In addition, we have been trying to keep virtual, as far as we can, to have virtual meetings, that is to say, online and with very little contact. And I really want to congratulate the National Youth Arm of the UNC, because they've now developed an app, and I'll ask my staff to post up the links and so on for the media to see. They've developed an app in which we are going to be having teachers helping with lessons for the SEA students. The students are at home, and so this will be virtual teaching where we will do it online for students at home and getting themselves prepped to write the SEA whenever such a time comes. These are some of the things we've done, and our local government corporations are also very involved in sanity, cleaning, etc., etc. I saw Chairman Henry Awong at the Kuva Tabaki Talparo, work that he's been doing there, and in the other corporations to see what we can do. One of the things I mentioned to the Prime Minister today, because I don't see much attention being paid to it, that very said public health ordinance gives tremendous powers to local government bodies in times of health issues such as we are facing now. And I see you're having difficulty. Are you having, both of you keep switching? Good. So you're trying to help your colleague, yes? Yeah. Local governments, bodies, tremendous powers to these local government bodies. We control 7 of the corporations of the 14, and we said to the Prime Minister, all the corporations should become heavily involved in dealing with the crisis that we now face, given the provisions of the Public Health Ordinance and the powers that they are given under that. I have not heard or seen the ODPM, which is the Office of Disaster Management. They have not had any kind of meetings or any sensitization issues. They liaise with the local government bodies. The local government bodies, they have a DMU, a Disaster Management Unit, and they are the first responders, and there will be a lot of responding to do. We are not in a natural disaster, but it is. We are in a disaster place with the crisis with the COVID. So I asked the Prime Minister if they would kindly look into engaging more with the local government bodies to give widespread help and support throughout the country. We raised several concerns, and I'll ask my colleagues in a bit to help us. The first thing we share in terms of concerns is the need for greater clarity and transparency and accountability to the population. Some of that we are getting, but a lot of it, even as I listened today, a lot of it is still very vague. A lot of it is vague, lacking in details and in specifics. And on the other hand, not just being vague and lacking in specifics, but a lot of it is that we are going to do that. We are going, and we will be. So whilst I commend government, for the efforts that they're making, and I know they're working very hard, I will not take that away. I know they're trying really, really hard. I think a whole of country approach that the Prime Minister keeps speaking about is most important because different views can be brought forward. So whilst it is my two colleagues were there with me today, Prime Minister in his press briefing mentioned, well, I brought 2 doctors, but those doctors, don't worry, we have the whole of the medical profession at hand. That's fine. I see no differences with that, but certainly we can raise issues, especially where you're talking now about bringing back retired medical professionals and engaging the younger professionals. I think all are needed. So I will not diss the contributions of the 2 doctors here. And when we speak, not just of the opposition, it's not a specific point of a doctor. We have a very wide pool of professionals in the health system who have been feeding us with points and making issues. So I want to thank my 2 colleagues for being there with us. I want to thank them for the issues they've brought forward, and they will share some of this with us in this briefing. Cost and source of government financing. This was one area of concern that we raised. How does government propose to finance the bailout measures? Well, now we know, because they've said they're going to deal with the HSF and they're going to deal with a $6 billion package. Again, specifics are not known, and we will await that. There's a lot of room for concern and questions in terms of what the government is saying it will do with the businesses. So you talk about the banks helping with the mortgage, the skipper mortgage payment and so on. But the questions arise, if you skip this month or you skip for 3 months, what happens when those 3 payments bunch up? So you will be going in at the end of the 3 months, or in 3 months, and still have the 4th month to pay. How will that work? Now, I know someone said they access their bank. I will not name the bank. And the bank is saying, I don't know anything about that. We don't know anything about that. You have a mortgage payment, you make your mortgage payment, or you negotiate otherwise. But they don't have any bly. They're not, that bank is saying, we're not going to give you a bly that you can pass, or just pass up. So government may have to rethink its suasion strategy and come with legislative interventions if they really want the banks to do that. I am told the Royal Bank has put out a statement, but FCB, which is a government's bank, has not said anything as to what they will do with respect to the mortgages. So we have a little concern about that. It may be just more in the talking rather than in the having it been implemented, and it may require legislative intervention to get it to happen. Things about clarity is needed about what kind of support will be given to businesses. What about these businesses that are going to be shut down? Are you going to assist them with a tax moratorium or with VAT payments, maybe a deferral of VAT payments, deferral of corporate taxes? I see today businesses calling for deferral of corporate taxes. So with respect to taxes as a whole, whether they be import duties, income tax, VAT, any other kind of tax, will these businesses that are going to be impacted because of government's measures to restrict and contain and constrain human behavior, what support will be given to them? So we have been told, yes, support will be given, but again, no details and no specifics. And these businesses need details and specifics ASAP. So cost and the source of financing was one area of concern. The other area of concern was to do with equipment and testing. Both members and the other MPs were present at listening to the press briefing. So in terms of what we shared with the Prime Minister today in our document, and orally, I will ask Dr. Gopi Singh, would you want to deal with this matter, please? Can we get this? And can I just say, I took the liberty of putting our concerns and our suggestions in a memo which I addressed to the Prime Minister so that there will be no misunderstanding in terms of what it is we wanted to share with the Prime Minister. These were put forward as suggestions. They were not put forward as mandates or that it's compulsory. We put these out, and in fact the memo is titled Opposition Suggestions for Consideration, that is by the government, in the fight against COVID-19. So there is a comprehensive document I think the staff would share or has shared with members of the media in terms of the suggestions that we are making. So we didn't go into the meeting, just to talk. We did have some concrete proposals, which we hope will be taken into account by the Prime Minister. And on that meeting with the Prime Minister, I said it was a very cordial meeting. I think the Prime Minister's main concern, apart from news, and did ask me if I can make a statement about misinformation. So I will make that statement. I said I would. He has made a statement. The government has repeatedly made a statement. To those of you who may listen to my advice, I will respectfully ask that you refrain from misinformation, because it will just add to panic rather than to the calm that we need in a time where we all need to hold hands together to survive. That is what we need to do now in the public interest and in the interests of the people, in the interest of health and safety of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I make that call to all, and I trust that we have to exercise caution. We are all in this obviously together, and some of us will come out of it, some will not. But in the meantime, I think if we have that faith and confidence in each other, that we can help each other along the way to try to contain this virus and, of course, to give the support where needed. So Dr. Tim will deal with our concerns with testing and equipment and testing. And in this, our proposals, I'll pass to you in a minute because we'll have to move the mic. In our proposal, we have 5 pillars. And these are based on mitigating the difficulties which we have seen in the international community. These 5 pillars are: 1, protecting the vulnerable, and we'll develop that in a minute should time permit. Protecting the economy, protection of our citizens' social net and safe and standard of living, ensuring our medical response follows international best practice, and 5, rebuilding our future as we ease out of the crisis. So 5 pillars in terms of our proposals, which we will share with you, time permitting, in detail. So I'll ask Dr. Gopi Singh now to talk to us about the concerns with equipment and testing. Here you go.
Thank you very much, our leader. Some of the concerns which we raised with the Prime Minister's team. The first area was the need for clarity in terms of the vast number of citizens who remain confused and still very concerned as to where to call, who to call, or where to proceed to, or which institution to go to if they have very serious symptoms. And that remains a major focus in terms of one of the major concerns that we raised with them. Some of these concerns were just attempted to be answered by the Prime Minister's media conference just a while ago. And because of this, I think we have some improved clarity when we shared with them the necessity for it. And they are now clarifying that they are going across to the World Health Organization standards. We had made a suggestion to Minister Dayal Singh, the 3 doctors on our leaders' team, about 2.5 weeks ago to 3 weeks, of the necessity for a hotline. And that that promise was made, but I saw Minister Dayal Singh still speaking this afternoon that we will do this, and it has not been concretized. So we are a little disappointed in the fact that after 3 weeks, they have not come to a fully operative hotline. And they're probably still going to do it, from what he said today. We asked for the contact numbers of the medical personnel on the front line and those who are receiving complaints and questions from the society to be published fully so that the population will get a clear understanding of who to call and what numbers and where they are responsible for. And we asked them to have that published and advertised so that it will bring some clarity to the wider population. An important issue which our leader raised, and we expanded a bit on it, on the criteria for eligibility for testing. And because of today's questioning on them and the concerns the leader raised, they obviously tried to answer it by bringing in the PAHO director to indicate that they are now going to be using carefully to expand the criteria according to the World Health Organization criteria for testing. Leader raised the issue of the insufficient kits. 3,000 is not enough for the CARICOM and Trinidad. Well, we heard the director of PAHO saying that they may probably, in the future, probably get another 3,000. We really look forward to that, so that more test kits would be available. And the leader also asked for more thrust on having the hazmat test kits and the protective personal equipment, and more to come in from, I believe, PAHO are the ones who really give these. We raised the issue that there are 20 ventilators at Kuva Hospital, and there are 2 at Cora. And the leader made a suggestion to the team, to the Prime Minister and his team, that we should seek to get more ventilators and probably use the Augustus Long Hospital, which has 50 beds. Dr. Bodo raised that issue with them, since it's closer to South Hospital in case if there is an overflow. And the Prime Minister indicated that they will be looking at probably increase the supply of these equipment and apparatus needed for it. We ask about the question what the government is going to do about the pharmaceuticals that the South Korea and China had been speaking about. Then there are now case studies about the use of interferon alpha 2B and the new drug, the hydroxychloroquine. We are aware from work being done by Professor Gault in France and his team, these are still experimental, and we advise the Minister of Health to formulate his National Advisory Committee on formulary to help him make a decision on the use of these pharmaceuticals in the serious cases. So, Leader, these are just some of the major ones we raised, and perhaps my colleague Dr. Bodo may want to expand on that.
Just to add to what Dr. Kupising has said on the issue of testing, in 3 countries where there has been really vigorous testing, that is Singapore, Hong Kong, and one other, so South Korea, the spread of the virus has really been suppressed as compared to, say, other places where they did not go into that kind of rigorous testing. Now, I do understand we cannot test everybody. I do understand that there are constraints, resources are limited. But I think that the government's approach has been one of dealing with the virus only on the basis that it's imported. So one criteria in order to get the testing is that you would have had to travel or be in contact with a person who has traveled. I think that is not sufficient, because healthcare professionals, for example, on the front line, they should be included in testing. I think Dr. Bodo would agree with that, Dr. Kupising. The healthcare, let me thank all healthcare professionals from at every level of the health sector. They have been doing a great job, I know, in very strange circumstances. But they should be included very early in terms of testing, because they may come in contact directly with a patient who may or may not be showing symptoms at that point in time, and or indirectly be exposed, because of the nature of their jobs, be exposed to the possibility of being infected with the disease. So whilst we are talking about travel as one of the criteria, today I listened to the PAHO rep, and what she's saying is there's a definition of who will be eligible for testing, and that is to say X, Y, P, and Z, but travel or contact with a person who has traveled. I think that is simply too restricted. It is too restricted, and we could end up like a place like Italy and other places that did not vigorously pursue testing of persons most exposed. Test, that's what the story is. We don't have enough. So yes, we have to limit them, but healthcare professionals should be somewhere really high up in the pecking order in terms of where testing should take place. And again, from the power doctor, in terms of the symptoms that you have to present, you have to have at least 2 of the symptoms before you will be the test will be administered. We raised with the government the fact that CAFA only has they can only do so many per day. How many is it?
About 20.
About 20 tests per day, okay? 20 in a population of 1.3 million. I'm saying we're not testing everybody, but that is just too little bit. So we asked government in our document to consider the use of other labs apart from CAFA who could be authorized, so therefore we could get the testing done on a wider basis, and that we could also have more personnel involved in the testing and in the, assessing, when you're taking the samples and doing the assessments. And there has been developed something now where you can do it very quickly. I saw in Florida where they just go in a mobile unit and they can take your swab and test it. So that way you don't all have to congregate in one place again to get the testing done. So with respect to testing and equipment, we raised some issues there. And then now we had, Dr. Boda, anything on health again, or we want to move along?
No, I think you've covered most of them.
Okay, thank you. So we had proposals now. So we raised concerns. Those were the concerns. And then we actually made some proposals, some suggestions. And I told you one was suggestions for protecting the vulnerable. And I'll ask Dr. Bodo to lead us through that, please.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition, colleagues, members of the media, citizens all. With regards to the pillars, Pillar 1 that we recommended was the protection of the vulnerable. We'll be very aware that this virus, although the majority of citizens who contract the virus will have a good chance of survival, the ones who may succumb will be the vulnerable, meaning the elderly, those who are immunocompromised, those who are diabetic, and so on. Be that as it may, and the leader of the opposition is reminding us that she is one of those that are vulnerable. But be that as it may, our concern will be what steps to take for protection of the vulnerable. Globally, we have seen the alarming and detrimental effect of COVID-19 it has had on the elderly population, and we have seen severe impacts with care homes and homes for the aged throughout the world, especially in Italy. And you would recall that a lot of the morbidity and the deaths are taking place in Italy because they have an elderly population. So that's an important lesson for us to learn from in terms of how we go avoiding that. As a result, we call on the government to institute proper measures and regulations to ensure those who run these homes implement proper steps to protect the elderly in their care. We are asking that the government, through the Ministry of Finance and Banking and the banking sector, work to assist the elderly in cashing their pension checks and other grants without exposing them to the threat of COVID-19. For example, at the end of the month, you would have a number of elderly citizens who would have to gather in the bank at the same time to collect their pension checks. So we're asking that some arrangements be made to stagger that process and protect these vulnerable and the elderly. We've also asked that the government work with the Ministry of Public Utilities to create a way to ensure that elderly don't have to choose between paying a bill or risking their health, and that strategic plans be created to facilitate them at this time.
Thank you. I want to pause for a moment to say thank you as we talk about protecting the vulnerable, Suggestion that government should look for a way to assist children who would have been on a school feeding program now that they're at home, whether some assistance could continue to be given to such families where their children would have been on the school feeding program. The second pillar, protecting the economy. Tim, you can take over, please. Protecting the economy.
Thank you, political leader of the opposition. This area, the honourable leader called on the government to indicate that in addition to the measures already announced by Prime Minister Rowley and the Minister of Finance, to seek to try to implement measures aimed at cushioning the effects of the small businesses particularly and the lack of employment. You realize that there's a lot of small businesses, the bars and the restaurant and a number of other areas would be, thousands of jobs will be lost. So the concern was expressed and the desire to support them was also expressed by the leader of the opposition. We also asked for consideration of making grants available to small businesses, grants available in addition to those which already exist, as a way of ensuring cash to keep them running and keep the workers paid. And we also asked that government may want to consider a tax holiday on the business levy and green fund contributions, given that the profits of many businesses will be seriously impacted. And they may also, the recommendation was also made to consider a reduction in deferral of utility payments for micro and small business, where they seem to have their revenue seriously depleted as a result of reduced operations. We ask for concessions to be considered for our import duties for those importing essential goods such as food, medication, medical supplies, and other essential items. And the honourable leader of the opposition, noting that the price of oil is US now $20 and our debt is over 120 billion thereabout, she asked the Prime Minister to consider seeking to have an immediate moratorium from our international and domestic lenders on our external and internal debt. And so the leader recommended to the Prime Minister that immediate discussions should therefore be considered and take place between these lending agencies, the World Bank and the IADB. And because of the possibility of the shortage of food, the honourable leader also asked for consideration for an immediate and short-term agricultural policy to be implemented to address the food security, the needs of the national community. And since our economy, we see that as possibly one of the things to make have some incentivization for farmers and other agricultural workers to improve the food production. And the leader indicated that the use of the Agricultural Development Bank could be one of the main areas where this could be looked at in terms of the support for the agriculturalists in their food production quest. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Tim. I did, when talking about the dealing with the vulnerable, protecting the economy and so on, we did raise a point in the meeting about the shortage of water. There are many areas in the country now, no water, and of course we know the acronym WASH first. WASH, WASH. And many of these people may not be the ones who could afford the sanitizers. That shortage of water is a serious, serious matter if we are to really be contemplating and working on suppressing the spread of the virus. So we did ask the Prime Minister to call on his Minister of Public Utilities to put some measures into place about the water supply. Now, the shortage is in two ways. We are in the dry season, yes. So on the water lines, a lot of water lines, no water. But in addition, where you have the water trucking system, that too has fallen apart. So I think it's a very serious matter that deserves very urgent consideration. I'm trying to keep it within our time frame, so I will move on quickly to Pillar 3, protection of the social safety net and standard of living. Minister, MP Dr. Bodo, please.
Leader of the Opposition. Of course, for us to fight this virus properly, we are employing the strategy of suppression. But of course, we recognize that with that strategy of suppression, there will also be some sort of economic loss. And it is in that regard we've come up with a strategy to protect the social safety net and the standard of living, and we've proposed some measures to the government. So we are calling on the government to look at some of the steps that have been taken, for example, in the United Kingdom and other nations, to enact or to consider enacting legislation which will temporarily protect evictions and new possession proceedings for tenants during the next 3 months. This will be in addition or will be offered to renters of the HTC. We've also called on the government through the Ministry of Labour to introduce a work-from-home / remote work policy, as well as proper rotations. So a lot of people are already working at home. This is going to be one of the strategies, and we want to reinforce and strengthen that. We are also looking at the role of the local government bodies, specifically in terms of protection of the homeless. The homeless present a great challenge in this situation, not only sometimes being elderly, but because of roaming on the streets and so on, they're able to, to pick up and spread this virus. So if this is ignored, we will have a challenge. The local government bodies can also ensure that the streets, the markets, and the public places such as bus stops and so on are properly sanitized on a daily basis. As the leader of the opposition pointed out, the public health ordinance carries with it tremendous powers, and therefore it is well within the power of the local government bodies to exercise these powers in a time of this crisis. We also are calling on the government to reconsider its policy on allowing students to take their laptops home, because now that the schools have been closed, it is a great opportunity, of course, for online learning to continue, and the laptops, of course, will assist in this manner. Leader.
Thank you. So we're getting there. We're Pillar 4 out of 5. Pillar 4 out of 5, and I'll turn over to Dr. Tim again. Pillar 4, ensuring our medical response follows international best practice.
I think we are all aware that to combat the spread of COVID-19 and reduce the curve, which has been discussed internationally, suppress the spike and have a more flattened type of fight with the infection, we must continue to follow the measures set out by the World Health Organization. And we encourage the government to expand, of course, the testing program to all suspected cases. And as the leader said just a while ago, a number of countries have realized, some of them too late, that tests, critically important and very early. So we ask the government to consider ramping up their testing very quickly. And as one of the Director General of WHO, I think you will remember saying, you cannot fight a fire blindfolded, and we cannot stop this pandemic if we don't know who is infected. So therefore, you have to have the information, and it gives you a true incidence of where you are as a country in relation to the COVID virus. We asked them to look at the South Korean model, and the leader of the opposition just mentioned a while ago the mobile testing stations, whether it's something that could be plausibly implemented with a more proactive approach towards detection. We asked the Prime Minister and his team to follow our CARICOM counterparts and try to get more resources in terms of the personal protective equipment and the testing kits and so on, which we understand will be given by PAHO, but from WHO, which passes it on to PAHO. So we sought the Prime Minister to seek more additional support from PAHO and WHO in this regard. One of the major areas as far as pharmaceuticals and treatment of patients, well, of course, we don't have many treatment options available except supportive treatment. In terms of pharmaceuticals, we asked them to ensure to the population, particularly the middle-aged and younger ones, who generally take things like aspirin and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for treating their fever and body aches and so on, to refrain from that and make that a public announcement, because it has been well proven by using these non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like aspirin, ibuprofen, Advil, Cataflam, Voltaren, Olfen, and also steroids, not to use those. And the research is showing clearly that the disease process seriously worsens, as it evidenced in Italy and is now being shown in North America with the younger population, and to use paracetamol as the first line of treatment. The opposition has a vast network of healthcare professionals, and the political leader gave the Prime Minister the information that we are willing to expand their support with our healthcare professionals. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. So, Pillar 5. Some of us will not survive this virus, and many of us will survive this virus, so we have to plan to rebuild our future as we ease out of the crisis, but that planning must take place now. We need to put our heads together. So I suggested to the Honourable Prime Minister that government should reformulate a national tripartite committee which will monitor the effects of the crisis as goes on, and also subsequently be able to report properly on the damage done to the labour market. We suggested that measures be examined immediately to address the needs of the unemployed, the homeless, and the self-employed, all of whom would want a state intervention whilst the crisis lasts. We ask government to consider convening the Energy Committee of Parliament to recommend ways which we can use to withstand the very, very significant vulnerability in the energy sector, because given where the price of oil has now reached, and in fact, most of our commodity prices have fallen. The things that we normally make money from, get revenue from, all those prices have fallen. Natural gas, methanol, ammonia, all those commodity prices, urea, they have also dropped. So we're in a really bad way. The COVID virus is like the last punch out. But the economy has already been depressed to such an extent that this latest knock is really the knockout punch, and therefore we should be coming together to formulate ways of getting other revenue streams, and in addition, how we will manage in terms of the energy sector. We suggested that a special committee of heads of chambers, businessmen, opposition members, government, be convened to create a medium-term and long-term revenue plan. We cannot just keep spending money. We've been doing that for the 4.5 years. As I said, the economy has collapsed already, even without this hit from the COVID-19. But we had no plan in those 4 years, and going forward as to how we will get revenue. So when that HSF is gone, the country is, you could say, bankrupt. Once that HSS, you draw down all that money that we had in savings, we are bankrupt. How do we go forward thereafter? We have to start to think about that now, and that's why we're suggesting these various committees. And they don't have to sit across the table. We can do it, as you know, there's Skype and there are other ways to do it online, off face. We suggested to the government to consider reducing the cost of flour, oil and rice that NFM produces, and or to take the VAT off. These are the basic foods that everybody would eat. We ask government to consider that, given, as we said, last time we estimated was 100,000 jobs have lost. That's before this COVID. Now the casinos shut down. I think there are about 5,000 of those kinds of workers, private members, clubs workers, are going to be on the line. All those people have been working in bars. I think my colleague today raised the issue of even the Venice, whom the minister registered, a lot of them work in these bars. All those jobs are gone, or will be gone by after today when the order takes effect. So we really have to consider how are we going to sustain people who will be losing their jobs. I saw the Prime Minister attempted, maybe he didn't do it deliberately, but attempted to put the closing of the Titan plant as one of the fallouts from COVID-19. And we all know that long before COVID-19 hit anywhere, they were talking about closing Titan plant. Why? Because of the gas price negotiated by the best salesman, the Honorable Prime Minister, when he went to Texas together with Minister Young. They said they had negotiated a deal with gas price that has proven very, very bad for most downstreamers, and Titan is no exception. So more jobs. Titan shut down, more jobs. So we're going to see more and more job losses. It means that the level of poverty is going to be increased, and we really have to plan how we will be getting out of that and how we'll help persons. So that suggestion about the cost of flour, oil, and rice. Now, we said to the Honourable Minister, still under this, with respect to the economy, we said to the Honourable Prime Minister to help alleviate some of the suffering that will come from the job losses and so on. Minister may want to consider the issue of the food cards. And we pointed out to the Honourable Minister Camille that the Minister had said that they would increase the amounts for the food cards. We pointed out to her today, look, that's all well and good, but that's the pool that you already have there. That's the pool of vulnerable people that you've already given the cards, so you're going to top them up. What about the new vulnerable? What about the new ones who will be going on the breadline? How are you going to help those people? Given, as I say, these measures will take away a lot of jobs and put people on the breadline. New pool, we remembered over 18,000 food cards had been taken away. So that the ones that are left, those are the ones getting the top off. In the press briefing this afternoon, the Minister attempted to address this by saying that they would do certain other things to help with the food card, and made a comment which those of us who were sitting there found very disturbing, and it is something I'll have to discuss with my parliamentary caucus, that the Minister said that they would give each MP, the 41 MPs, 50 food cards. There's going to be a riot in my office. I have a constituency of, 28,000 people, each of us here. And you're giving us 50. I think that is, I'm in fear of losing my life. And it's not a joke. What are we going to do with 50 food cards? I'll have to discuss with my colleagues whether we ask the goodly minister to use good offices to do the testing they do and the criteria and give it out. I don't, that's like putting, anyway. It's something that doesn't sound very feasible to give us 50 food cards to cater for 28,000, 25,000 constituents. I think that is a recipe for some kind of riot. Because once, I saw it for Christmas, we tried to give all the hampers. And, well, there's only so many that we can give. So government provided the hampers. What was it, 100 hampers?
Food cards.
Food card. They were food cards, not the actual hampers. And the same thing happened. Even with 100, it cannot service, will not service. And therefore you're putting MPs at risk when they agree to give you or to give you and leave out the rest of them. That's a recipe, I think, for some kind of chaos. So it is something that's my personal view at the moment, but I'll discuss it with my colleagues in the caucus as to how we should approach that particular matter. So as we close this part of our briefing, in terms of where what we shared with the Prime Minister and his team this morning, we also pointed out that as far as possible, the legislative interventions, the actual drafted legislation, if it could be made available to parliamentarians at the earliest opportunity so we can properly research and properly respond and assist in making good law. And that's it. In conclusion, we thank him for the time, and we thank you for your time. Before we take any questions, I want to thank all those good people out there who have been helping corporate citizens, private citizens. They have been providing lunches for children, following not the failure or the non-provision through the school feeding program. There are a lot of corporate citizens who have been working there. I've already thanked the healthcare professionals And really, I think thus far the people of Trinidad and Tobago have been, in the majority, very disciplined, very calm. We have stayed very calm. So we want to thank our citizens and residents here for taking on this in good speed. And as someone always reminds me, now is the time. The time is now for us to do our best to prevent the spread of the virus. And always remember what I told you. Wash, W, you wash and or sanitize. The A, you avoid touching hands on face and nose. The S is the social distancing. And the H is proper hygienic practices, such as if you have to sneeze or cough, you use a napkin, you throw it away, and other such things. So wash, W-A-S-H, and let's all continue to live a healthy life. Thank you all for your time, and I'll take questions. Is there anything further? Tim? No? Barry?
No.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yes, opposition. Do you think if the 14-day period of closing the border to non-nationals and other measures is a good enough time frame? Or do you expect it to be extended?
I think this thing is an evolving phenomenon. And we can expect the goalposts to keep shifting depending on how bad things get or how good or better they get. I heard the minister today repeatedly, the national security, repeatedly in the press briefing, stressing there was nothing he could do about nationals who are stranded abroad. And he had finished his contribution. At the end, he came and he said, look, my phone, people are on my phone asking me, but they understand there are 60 or 70 people, Trinis in Margarita. He says, but if the people have closed their borders, there's nothing I can do. I don't know if the government may want to consider, in the same way that the U.S., they're saying you have no airlines are flying, but we have an airline. And in the same way that the U.S. sent a plane to pick up their nationals somewhere, is it totally not possible for us to, if it is as many as 70 in one place, is this something we should ask government to consider whether they can? Because if we don't take care of our nationals, we can't expect someone else to do that. I think the U.S. had sent, the U.K. might have sent to pick up their nationals in China. So something for consideration. There may be a plausible, feasible reason why that cannot be done, but I don't think we should just throw up our hands and say that's all the government can do. I think we should explore whether that is a feasible plan of action. Now you're talking about the non-nationals closing for 14 days. In the first instance, yes, and depending on how it goes, we can see the goalposts may shift. Great. So I stayed within your hour, and I thank you very much for your time and for being here. Good.